Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Hi, Malika here. As 2024 comes to a close, we're revisiting 10 stories at the Take that shaped the year. This year, Russia's war in Ukraine passed its 1,000th day. And on his way out of office, U.S. President Joe Biden gave Ukraine something it had long been asking for: permission to use American-made long-range weapons to strike deep into Russian territory. In this episode, we heard from Al Jazeera's correspondent in Moscow about the potential consequences of this move and how it's taken the Russia-Ukraine war into uncharted territory. This episode originally aired on November 21st, 2024. All dates and references reflect that time. Here's the show. Today, a new phase in the Russia-Ukraine war that's continuing to escalate.
Striking into internationally recognized Russian territory with American-made missiles. Russia said the move was a major escalation.
The U.S. is temporarily closing its embassy in Kyiv out of an abundance of caution because it has received specific information of a potential significant air attack on the city on Wednesday.
So why is this happening now? And where could things go from here? I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take.
My name is Yulia Shapovalova. I'm a Moscow correspondent for Al Jazeera English. My team and I, we work here in Moscow and we travel around Russia to get information and to basically create the best reports we can deliver.
It's really good to have you, especially because just in the last 48 hours, there has been a flurry of news headlines coming out of Ukraine and Russia. Who better to go over them with than you, located in the Russian capital, Moscow. What have these last couple days been like for you? What have you been keeping your eye on?
Well, quite a lot of news, of course. And first and foremost, we know that Ukraine has received permission from the Biden administration to use American-supplied missiles to strike deeper into Russian territory. We know that President Putin, the Russian president, has signed a new nuclear decree.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has formally lowered the threshold for his country's use of nuclear weapons.
We obviously can't underestimate the move by the US. If we talk American-supplied missiles to Ukraine, the tactical ATACMS missiles in particular, their range is a bit more than 300 kilometers. So we can't diminish their power, their potential impact and damage they may cause. They can reach not just border regions, but regions deeper inside Russia and target a large number of cities, towns and villages, causing a lot of tragic deaths of its residents and destroying the infrastructure there. We can't diminish the significance of this move by the Biden administration. Therefore, the Kremlin spoke about the elected government of the United States in the Ukrainian crisis.
If long-range missiles are going to be applied from Ukraine into Russian territory, it will also mean that they are operated by American experts, military experts. And we will be taking this as a qualitatively new phase of the Western war against Russia, and we'll react accordingly.
Also, other Russian officials say such strikes is a step forward toward World War III. And early in September, Russian President Vladimir Putin also commented on the possible permission for Ukraine to use Western weapons against Russia.
This will
mean that NATO countries, the United States, and European countries are at war with Russia. If this is the case, we will make the appropriate decisions based on the threats that we will face.
According to him, this permission would change the very essence, very nature of the conflict. And now it remains to be seen how it's going to change it.
Changing the very essence and nature of this conflict. So much to unpack there. You know, Yulia, as you and I sat down for this interview, some news broke not too long before that. And that was that the U.S. Embassy in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, said it had received specific information of a potential air attack from Russia.
The United States has announced that it is temporarily closing its embassy in Kyiv today and instructing employees to shelter in place.
They closed their doors, as did the Spanish, the Greek, and Italian embassies. But all of this comes after what you mentioned, that big news there, that Ukraine fired those U.S.-made missiles, the ATACMS, into Russia on Tuesday, something the U.S. gave it permission to do just days earlier. And on Wednesday, the U.S. made another policy shift with Joe Biden authorizing anti-personnel landmines to Ukraine. So what has been the actual reaction in Russia to all of this?
Well, of course, here in Russia, we've heard the U.S. position. We've heard it many times that the United States authorized strikes against Russia and weapons that President Biden has allowed here to use will give Ukraine more ability to defend itself. That's from the U.S. point of view, and as well as possibility that Russia will understand that the use of force to seize Ukrainian territory will not be successful for Russia. And the U.S. tries to make Russia leave Ukrainian territory. So perhaps Russia will begin to negotiate peace. The U.S. Defense Secretary also said that the decision to send anti-personnel landmines to Ukraine will dictated by the new tactics of the Russian military on the front, on the battlefield. The White House hopes that the use of anti-personnel mines will help Kyiv contain the advance of Russian troops in the Donetsk front, which is taking place right now.
So that's what's happening in the halls of power, as it were. I'm curious about what the mood is among the public in a place like the capital where you are. As this war has gone on, you often hear that people in Moscow and other big cities that are removed from maybe some of those front lines where those missiles could reach, that life is somewhat normal. Is it more of the same right now? Do things feel normal?
Well, it is. I mean, Moscow is a huge city, and while different people they feel differently. All these latest developments, they triggered a lot of reactions. There was the news in the morning that the Lipetsk region, for instance, would purchase street shelters for its people because of the decision to allow Ukraine to use US missiles to strike deeper into Russia. And they're not even the border region. Military correspondents here write that earlier American and Western high-precision weapons brought Russia enough problems, and these potential attacking strikes can bring serious consequences too. But according to them, Ukraine doesn't have too many of such missiles. Therefore, they won't change much. They won't help Ukraine reach its 1991 borders. They will rather provoke Russia to strike back, as Russia has enough advanced means to repel attacks by any type of weapons. Plus, Russia will be able to test the work of its own air defense systems against American missiles, which is considered here kind of a good battlefield experience for Russia's S-400 and Panzer air systems. But talking about ordinary people, nobody here is particularly happy about American missiles flying in Russia's direction, of course, from Ukraine. But still, many realize that this happened just because Russian missiles are flying to Ukraine. And it's been happening for more than 1,000 days now. So unfortunately, not only military facilities, but also civilians will suffer from the strikes of these missiles, of course. And inevitably, some missiles will deviate from their course, and declinations, so warehouses or airfields can be destructive for ordinary people as well who live nearby. All this is a big disaster for residents of the regions close to Ukraine, and of course, the direct consequences of Russia's decision to launch this so-called special military operation on February the 24th, 2022.
More with Yulia after the break. You know, Yulia, earlier you mentioned that a lot of this from the U.S. side is in response to Russian maneuvers and tactics in the war. And so I want to pick apart the why now, because as we've said, this is a significant escalation in this war now. These are weapons that Ukraine had been asking for from the United States for some time, and for the restrictions to be removed for some time. Why do you think it's happened now?
Well, so we understand that this is a decision of the outgoing Joe Biden administration, and it seems to be a well-thought decision from the American point of view. The Kremlin is hoping that it will agree with President-elect Donald Trump pretty soon on the end of this war. And, the Kremlin hopes that it will leave behind a solid piece of Ukrainian territory as well and announce its victory. But before Donald Trump's inauguration, American attack can seriously damage the Russian military infrastructure as well and stop the counteroffensive in Russia's Kursk region, which was partially taken by Ukraine back in August this year. And all that can weaken Vladimir Putin's position in the negotiation. Also, the new nuclear doctrine was signed just a little over a day after the announcement that Ukraine had received permission from the US to strike at Russian territory. So the changes to Russia's nuclear doctrine allows the country to lower the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons. So that's the way Russia wants to retaliate. And some might say that Russia once again is trying to saber-rattling, but others say that Russia has every right to defend itself. So we hear all the time about Russia's response to the crossing of so-called red lines, and many here say that in response, Russia can provide also the long-range weapons to its friendly states to, that surround NATO countries, for instance.
Yulia, you have brought up the very frightening potential of the nuclear option and the use of nuclear weapons, because, as you mentioned, President Putin amended his policy, lowering that threshold to include aggression supported by a nuclear country, which effectively is what's happening right now with Ukraine and the United States, and also the UK's involvement with their Storm Shadow missiles that are now in use. So keeping all of that in mind, I want to get the view from Russia, because Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, called Tuesday's strike a sign that the West wants escalation. So clearly that is the official viewpoint from Moscow. Now, another lawmaker in Russia referred to Joe Biden as Bloody Joe after the news came out that he was giving Ukraine this permission to use these weapons. And yet another politician said that this was a significant step towards World War III. How do you think that rhetoric affects the calculus here of what happens next and what Russia does next?
Well, I think the world is holding its breath right now because everyone is pretty scared about what's going on. This is probably the biggest conflict, the Second World War, and everybody is waiting for Russia's response now. So Russia basically assigned its new nuclear doctrine, and after all those strikes by the ATACMS missiles and Storm Shadow missiles, everybody is waiting for how Russia is going to respond. Likely that the Ukrainian armed forces will continue attacking Russian facilities with American missiles for the next couple of months, at least until Donald Trump's inauguration. And the Kremlin will be forced to respond somehow, and probably with furious bombing of Ukrainian cities first and foremost.
You talked earlier about those red lines, and the use of that phrase comes up so often when it comes to war. This is also not the first time, though, that Putin has talked about the nuclear weapons option. And the US and Ukraine have presumably ignored those perceived red lines without major consequence. So do you think that things have reached a point where Putin almost has to respond in a dramatic way or risks his warnings not being taken seriously?
Well, we've heard from the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov as saying that if Ukraine uses American-supplied weapons trying to target Russian territory, the response could be a nuclear response. But we also heard recently from Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, who said that Russia is a responsible player and it will do anything possible to prevent this nuclear conflict to start.
We are strongly in favor of doing everything not to allow nuclear war to happen.
In the past, the Soviet Union and the United States tried to do everything to stop it and basically to prevent it to happen. So on the one hand, everybody is listening to Russia's rhetoric, and Russia continues this same rattling. But on the other hand, Russia once again says that it is a peacemaker and it does not want to use nuclear weapons because it will bring the total disaster. Everybody will die, and Russia understands that as well.
Finally, Yulia, all of this is happening as the war passed its 1,000th day mark earlier this week, as you noted. So let's talk about the way out. Is peace on the table at all?
Well, to be honest, Russia is quietly hoping for Donald Trump's new administration in the White House. No doubt it wants to start peace negotiations with the new American authorities. So it means that Russia really wants to finish this conflict because it's been into its third year. But on the other hand, the problem is that Russia does want to retain the taken territories. Russia wants them all, and it's a big problem. So Russia doesn't want to give up these territories. Russia really wants to change the current Ukrainian government. Well, it calls it the Ukrainian Nazi regime. It's interesting. So the war has been almost lasting for 3 years, but we understand that the big tactics and strategies Russia uses, they are not quite effective, to be honest, right? Because we can see that the Vladimir Zelensky administration is still there in place. So basically Russia is moving forward, but it's moving forward quite slowly. So after 1,000 days, Russia has captured all it wanted initially. And the hatred is just overwhelming, the hatred towards Russia. And it is for future generations to deal with it, because Russia wanted the official status for the Russian language there in Ukraine. But the thing is that even those Ukrainians who used to be loyal to Russia, to the Russian people, to the Russian language, who spoke the Russian language themselves, because that was used to be their mother tongue, they now voluntarily refuse to speak Russian and they switch to Ukrainian voluntarily. They do not want to hear anything connected to Russia, to Russians, and so on. So basically, at the moment, there's no end in sight. We can presume, of course, that Russia and Vladimir Putin, they truly hope that with the new US administration, things will change for the better for Russia, and Russia will be able to find the way out of this stalemate.
Well, Yulia, I said finally, but I have one more question. I wonder what it's like for you to cover these ups and downs of this now more than 1,000-day-old war. What has that been like?
Well, to be honest with you, it's not easy, because I am a Russian citizen and I live in this country. And probably you know that with this special military operation, We have so many restrictions in our lives nowadays. So I really have to be very cautious. Of course, we just, what I try to do, to bring in, to explain to our viewers Russia's official position. But on the other hand, I also try to bring the other position. People who are in exile right now in Russia, they say different things, and they think something else. And it is for our viewer to decide what is right and what is wrong, and choose what they actually want to choose.
Yeah. Well, Yulia, thank you for making the decision to keep covering it despite those obstacles and hurdles in front of you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's The Take. Now, we want to hear from you. What stories do you want to see next on the show? Let us know in the comments below what you'd like us to cover. Your feedback helps shape future episodes, so don't be shy. We'll see you tomorrow.